Hi everyone, thank you for joining me for another book review video. Today we are going to be talking about Henry Raeburn and Anthony Van Dyck's drawings. So I think these two are pretty underappreciated and these are two pretty good books. So let's go ahead and take a look. This book, like the next book we'll look at, was published to accompany an exhibit of Raeburn's work. It, like many books of this nature, starts with a biography. It also has an essay that places Raeburn and his work in the context of Scottish history. My favorite essay in this book, though, is an essay on Raeburn's methods and materials, which I thought was really fascinating because, as you'll hear about more as we flip through this book, there isn't a ton known about Raeburn's life, especially his early life and his education, so the essay that kind of analyzes his materials and methods is really interesting. Some of the information I've learned from reading this book is that Sir Henry Raeburn was born March 4th, 1756, to a yarn boiler named Robert Raeburn and his mother Anne Elder. There isn't a ton to know about his early life or art education. He married the widow Anne Edgar, who had previously been married to a man of considerable means. I think because not a ton is known about his personal life, the biography portion of this book also includes a lot of information about his techniques, such as how he used wet into wet painting technique and would sometimes score a line through the wet painting that he would later fill in with other pigment. It talks about how he did this in the painting of the man figure skating that is seen on the front cover. And I've actually been able to see that painting in person when it traveled to the States, and it really is a fantastic painting. So his techniques and methods were actually, like, in print quality, I don't think they come across as well, but in person, I can vouch for they're really interesting. Another interesting thing that this book points out is just how varied Raeburn would paint. Even paintings completed relatively close together in time would have vastly different styles. Some would have thick paint, bold use of color, and be loosely painted, while other paintings would be tightly refined, more subdued, and have a much thinner application of paint. And for me personally, I have seen this in Raeburn's work whenever I've been able to see his work in a museum, like how different some of it is. I mean, there's one painting at the Kimball Museum in Fort Worth that's relatively loosely painted, and I really, really like seeing. I mean, it's a beautiful painting. And then the one that's the man on the cover, the man figure skating, is very tightly painted. Like, they really do look like different painters. So I think it's fascinating that this book points out that he was doing that kind of variation in style all and all within like a year. Like, he wasn't doing this. This wasn't different stages of his career, which is how most artists kind of go through time and they change their styles. Raeburn was just kind of doing it all at once. So he's made me appreciate Raeburn's skill in that way, reading through this book. So I thought that was fascinating. For the technical side of this book review, the print quality is pretty good. The full page illustrations that you'll see from time to time as I flip through are really nice, and if there were more of them, then I would probably recommend this book more. But because those are kind of confined to just like a page every now and then, the smaller images are okay print quality, good enough, but not great. So in that case, this is one of the books that I'd probably say if you're a fan of Raeburn, go ahead and get it. If you're not, then this is probably a pass. The written information is interesting, but not, you could live without it. In other words, so that's my general advice for this book. I enjoy it. I actually got it because I got it as a gift for my husband because he shares a birthday with Raeburn, so I thought it was funny. And that's kind of why I purchased this book, and I don't pick it up all that often, but I'm glad I have it. I do really like being able to see the close-ups of his work every now and then. Yeah, so that is pretty much my general take on this book. I will put the links, of course, in the description down below. I think when I bought it, it was going for around $40, and I don't honestly think I'd recommend buying it for that much. I don't personally think it's worth it, but of course you can be the judge of that for yourself now that you've had a chance to look through it. This book was made to accompany an exhibit on Anthony Van Dyck's drawings at the Morgan Library that also traveled to the Kimball Museum in Fort Worth. It starts with a chronology of his life and moves into a biography. There's an essay on Van Dyck as a draftsman and pretty detailed excerpts on his drawings that were in the show. It also separates his drawings into different periods of his career, which seems to be largely based around where he was living at the time. I have not had a chance to read through this whole book, as it is quite a lot of information, but to start with the basics, Anthony Van Dyck was born March 22nd in Antwerp and died at the age of 42. He was a pupil of Peter Paul Rubens. Rubens was also so impressed by Van Dyck that he actually hired him as a copyist to help Rubens complete his many commissions. Van Dyck also really admired Titian and strove to incorporate a lot of Titian's influence into his own work. He was renowned for his portraits, but never really made much headway in the world of history painting, and the way that this book tells it is it was actually Rubens that was maybe responsible for Van Dyck not becoming more of a history painter, because he highly praised Van Dyck's portraits and was recommending him to patrons specifically as a portrait artist. So the book also indicates that this was, maybe a calculated thing on Rubens' part, so as to not have the competition for history painting. Of course, I'm sure there is speculation in that. I'm not exactly sure when this book was written. I'll put it in the description because it might be a bit of an older book and therefore have slightly outdated information. But I thought it was interesting to include nonetheless the idea that Rubens would have actually sabotaged Van Dyck to not lose history painting commissions because Van Dyck was just that good. As far as more technical information about this book, overall I think the print quality is pretty good. All of the pages are matte finish, so it's really nice for copying from because you don't get a lot of glare. I think the most impressive thing about this book is just the sheer quantity of drawings. So if you like Van Dyck's drawings at all, then this will be a valuable resource. And like I said, if you're purchasing art books in order to do master copies from them, then I think this is also a really good one to choose as well. Also, the written information that I have read has seemed interesting and well written. It's not as completely speculative as other art books can be, which I appreciate. And obviously the anecdote about Rubens is a bit speculative, but when I say speculative, I mean a lot of people try to get so inside the artist's head whenever they're looking at this drawing or that drawing, and I just feel like they go a little bit overboard sometimes, or they hyperfixate on one detail or another, and it doesn't seem like this book does that with the stuff that I've read, at least. So all in all, I think if you're looking for a really good book on Anthony Van Dyck and specifically on his drawings, then I think this is a great one to get. I have another one that's supposed to be on his drawings and paintings, which I can't remember if I've shown on this channel before, but it's not as good of a print quality and it's not as good in the information department. So this is probably the best book on Van Dyck as an artist that I've found, and of course I wish that there was one, just as good on his paintings that I had in my possession, but since I don't have that, this one's been really valuable. I think that to find really good drawing books is sometimes kind of hard, so again, this is a pretty good one for if you're really trying to study drawing, specifically drawing that, predates 19th century and goes back further and has a little bit more of the Renaissance inspiration. Then I really, really do think that this is one that's pretty valuable. To be honest, this is a book that I thought I would be gifting soon, but now I've gone and got myself all excited about it again. Honestly, most art books are only valuable as long as you're using them. So if this is a book that you think that you'd use a lot and reference a ton, then I think it's really helpful. But if you aren't particularly interested in copying drawings, then I wouldn't say that it's just so good everyone should have it. There are a couple books that I think are just so good everyone should have it. But this one in particular, I think the print quality is good. It could be better. The size of the images could be bigger and better. So as positive as I am being about this book, I do just want to throw in that disclaimer every now and then because we only have so much space in our homes. There's no point in filling it with books we won't use. So all in all, that is my take on this book. I hope you enjoyed that video. I already have books picked out for the next one, so if you're interested in sticking around, go ahead and subscribe and I'll see you then.